unions, which were undermined heavily by raiding and by expulsion and by the Taft-Hartley Act, which mandated non-communist oaths on the part of the leaders, had an absolutely devastating effect, not just upon the labor movement, but upon the entire progressive movement in the United States. Those unions were remarkable in a lot of ways. United Electrical Workers, for example, which still exists, one of the few that managed to hang on, although at their peak they had 500,000 members. Now they have maybe 50,000, 60,000 members. The United Electrical Workers adopted a principle called super seniority. I mean, seniority, of course, is one of the pristine standards of American labor. And yet the question of seniority, the way it worked out, discriminated against African American men and women because of last hired and first fired. So UE and a number of these other unions, mine mill and smelter, packing house, tried to modify contracts to leave openings for what later became affirmative action. And that was tremendously courageous because they had to really educate the white members of their unions to understand why it was in their interest to at least trim away some aspects of seniority in order to assure equality in the workplace. There's Ropes'. This is another, I guess, Progressive Party rally. I think the man speaking is named William Alpheus Hunton, one of the real heroes of this period. He had been an English professor at Howard University and eventually became a close aide and collaborator with W.E.B. Du Bois, and eventually accompanied Du Bois to Africa in order to write the great Encyclopedia Africana Encyclopedia, which was never completed, in that both Du Bois and Hunton died. But Hunton was one of my heroes, and Hunton had been a trustee of the bail fund of the Civil Rights Congress, and when the Young American Committee demanded that the names of the contributors to the bail fund be turned over to them, Hunton refused and went to jail. And there's a very famous photo, which always irritated the crap out of me, a photo of Dashiell Hammett going to jail, and he's handcuffed to this very distinguished-looking black man who is never identified. And that was out, not meaning any disrespect to Dashiell Hammett, who many people argue was an even better writer than Hemingway, but we won't get into that. This is Du Bois meeting Mao Zedong. One of the things in this period, growing up in this period, was the impact of Du Bois, who just had a remarkable way of projecting this deep anti-colonialist consciousness in his speeches, in his writing, in his travels, so that back in the late 40s and early 50s, we knew, unlike, self-indulgent to say, we knew about what was going on in South Africa. At least we knew something about it. We knew something about what was developing in Kenya and in other parts of Africa and other parts of the developing world, thanks to Du Bois. And there's Du Bois with Kwame Nkrumah, who eventually goes to Ghana. First week in September 1949, Robeson attempts this is Peekskill, Robeson's concert at Peekskill, which is violently attacked by a mob. 2,500 trade unionists form a big circle around the campground where the concert was being held. This is a raucous crowd. When the concert ended, the cars and buses were all shuttled into a single little narrow dirt road, which was set up really for, the mobs to just put the people under siege. This is Robeson at the concert. These people all around him are protecting him because they were sure they had spotted some snipers in the hillsides around, and they figured that there would be an attempt to assassinate Robeson, and these people were ready to give their lives to protect him. And that's another photo, a little slightly better photo of Robeson at Peekskill. But Peekskill was the kind of transforming moment in terms of the intensification of violence against the left in this country. There's a very fine actress named Bea Richards, who was a victim of, I guess you'd call it the white list, not the black list, because white people, blacklisting black people. But this is Frederick O'Neill, who was later became president of Actors Equity, another fine actor blacklisted. This is one of my favorite actors, who I had met actually, is William Marshall. He was blacklisted for a number of years. Brilliant actor. He had the kind of force and presence and charisma, almost equaling that of a Robeson. That's him playing Blackula, because by the early 60s, he was able to get back into the movies, but the only roles he could get was the Black Dracula. There were others, Canada Lee, there were many others who were victimized in a very special kind of a way during this period, because these black artists were, in a sense, you know, they were told, well, the loyalty, quote, you put quotes around the word loyalty, the loyalty of white people was expected, but the loyalty of blacks was commanded, and that they were punished very, even though the number of black artists working in the business at that time was not that great, they were really seriously under assault. This is a sad story. One of my favorite folk singers who I met when I was a kid in the Catskills, Josh White. Josh White, to save his career, crawled before the Un-American Committee. The sad thing about it is he insulted himself because he made, you know, he made some remarks about black people being dumb, you know, and black people being easily seduced by, you know, these leftists. Korean War, a terribly violent, awful war, which ensnared me in the draft, that is. It was significant and transforming in the sense, really, that it triggered the National Security Document 68. It triggered the permanent militarization of the economy. It complicated and undermined the struggle for black liberation to the extent that there was talk before that, hey, you got the Marshall Plan for Europe, why not a Marshall Plan for the cities in the United States? That was all wiped away by Korea, and terrible violence and intensification of red baiting that came as a result of the Korean War. In the meantime, in 1950, and this is something amazing thing, David Levering Lewis writes this wonderful 2-volume biography of W.E.B. Du Bois, and never once in the book mentions that in 1950, Du Bois ran as a candidate for the United States Senate on the American Labor Party ticket. He got over 200,000 votes, which is only about 6%, you know, but still, it was an incredible achievement. Du Bois he was Du Bois. He agreed to run. It wasn't a smart thing having to run, in my opinion, because he was running against Herbert Lehman, a liberal Democrat who was enormously popular in New York. Didn't make much sense in the whole context of the time. But he had agreed to it with certain strictures, that he would speak for 20 minutes, and that at a rally, if he was scheduled to go on at 9, they must guarantee that he's there at 9 p.m. exactly, and at 9:20 he leaves the platform and there's a car waiting for him to take him home. That was Du Bois. And yeah, I guess one other thing I should say about Du Bois. In 1950, I got a job after I graduated high school. I got a job running what we used to call a mimeograph machine. That nobody knows what it is anymore. Don't shake your head because
we
that
had them in the 60s.
You did have them in the 60s.
Right, that's what we did.
With the ink and the,
I know,
and the
the
stencils.
purple.
Oh, the stencils, awful. Anyway, I got a job working for a group called the Committee for Peaceful Alternatives. And they were going to have a big peace conference in Chicago under the aegis of a very distinguished professor at the University of Chicago named Robert Havinghurst. And my job was run the mimeograph machine, do errands, go to the bank. The reason I know about going to the bank is because it's part of this memo. I just asked for my FBI file, and the FBI says he's making deposits at the Amalgamated Bank. We've got to find out what I was depositing checks for the Committee for Peaceful Alternatives. But at one point, Du Bois had an office in the Frederick G. Field Library on West 26th Street, and they asked me to go up to his office to have him sign some kind of proclamation in regard to this Committee for Peaceful Alternatives. And I go up to this